You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
Welcome to One Bite is Everything, the podcast that connects every bite you take to the bigger world. I'm your host, Dana DiPrima. If you're new here, this show brings you behind the curtain of our food system so you can see how your plate shapes your health, your community, the environment, and the economy. Today, we are talking about something that might feel simple on the surface, but is actually one of the clearest warnings we have about the future of food. Coffee, your morning ritual. The small comfort that starts your day and the crop that climate change is pushing closer to the edge. In this episode, you will hear from a few experts who explain why coffee is becoming harder to grow, why prices are rising, why yields are shrinking, and why entire communities that rely on coffee production are facing a fragile future. You'll hear about deforestation and monocultures, the tightening climate window for Arabica, and the social and political fallout when a crop this foundational starts to fail. You'll also hear about the hopeful side. Women farmers leading more resilient cooperatives, growers returning to shade systems that protect biodiversity, scientists reviving wild coffee species to withstand heat and disease, and small supply chains that actually rebuild stability from the ground up. This is not a story about losing your latte. It's a story about understanding how climate shows up in the familiar parts of your life and why listening to these signals matters. And as always, it's a story about farmers, because every system we explore in this podcast connects right back to them. So settle in with your own cup and let's get into it. There's something poetic about the fact that climate change, this gigantic, overwhelming planet-sized crisis, is now creeping its way into the one tiny dependable ritual that humans across the world cling to every morning: coffee. We may ignore melting glaciers, rising seas, and politicians arguing on TV, but threaten somebody's morning cup? Suddenly, people are paying attention. Coffee is the closest thing we have to a universal love language. It's the social glue of morning routines, office kitchens, study sessions, first dates, and late-night existential spirals. And now, ironically, it's also the canary in the climate coal mine. As you move through these little conversations, think of your morning coffee as more than a comforting ritual. It's also becoming one of the first everyday luxuries, quietly reflecting the pressure of a changing climate. Not in dramatic ways, not in breaking news headlines, but in subtle signals. Harvests shrinking, prices creeping up, farmers climbing higher into the mountains in search of cooler air. It's a reminder that climate change rarely announces itself with a dramatic entrance. It tends to slip in through the back door, altering the familiar things that we never imagined could be vulnerable, right down to the cup we reach for before we're even fully awake.
Coffee is the number 6 driver of deforestation on planet Earth. That is very bad. It is number 6. It's not number 20 or 200. This is why its greenhouse gas emissions are through the roof. But it's not just deforestation. It's got pesticide-soaked monoculture that has a huge impact on carbon and biodiversity too. Deforestation is bad for carbon, but so is monoculture. So there's a lot going on, and people do not know, and if they knew, they would not agree. I know that I sound a bit wound up about it, but agriculture is a third of climate change and 80% of biodiversity loss. These things are no joke. These are existential problems we need to wrap our arms around. And for us to just allow the top 7 commodities to be killing global forests is crazy. We need forests.
Etelle Higonnet is the leader of Coffee Watch. We heard from her in an entire episode on the subject. I will link it in the show notes. She knows where all of the skeletons in the coffee crisis are buried. Here, Etelle is presenting numbers that highlight just how staggering the environmental impact truly is. Coffee isn't just contributing to deforestation, it's the sixth largest cause globally. That means out of all of the destructive, land-clearing, biodiversity obliterating industries we have created, coffee is sitting at the same table as cattle, soy, and palm oil. And here's where the plot thickens. Coffee doesn't just cause deforestation, it also depends on the very forests it destroys. Coffee evolved in cool, shaded mountain forests where the canopy above moderated temperature, kept moisture in the soil, softened harsh winds, and created a balanced ecosystem filled with birds and bats that naturally controlled pests. When farmers clear that forest to plant wide open monocultures, all of those protective forces disappear. The soil begins drying out faster, temperatures on the ground rise, pests that were once kept in check multiply. Diseases spread more easily, and without shade, the plants become exposed to the intense heat waves and unpredictable rainfall patterns that climate change is accelerating. So the industry finds itself trapped in a paradox of its own making, removing the very ecological safety net that kept coffee stable for centuries, and then struggling to survive in the destabilized landscape left behind. It's not just an environmental contradiction. It's a slow erosion of the conditions that make coffee possible in the first place. And the coffee crop most sensitive to temperature change is Arabica, the bean that makes up 60% of global coffee. It can only survive within a very narrow climate window, temperatures between 18 and 23 degrees Celsius. A shift of just 1 degree can slash yields. And by 2050, studies project that 50% of current coffee-growing land will become unsuitable for Arabica. Yields drop not because the plant is weak, but because it hasn't evolved to handle the kind of rapid, unpredictable change that we're seeing today. Warmer temperatures allow pests to thrive at higher altitudes. Diseases like coffee leaf rust spread more aggressively. Rainfall becomes erratic, confusing the plant's natural flowering cycles. Beans develop faster than they should, losing both complexity and volume. Arabica isn't delicate by design. It's simply unprepared for a climate that no longer resembles the environment it evolved in. And that mismatch between the plant's biology and our rapidly changing world is one of the central tensions in the future of coffee.
We can't do cinnamon, we can't do vanilla, we can't do coffee. There goes your latte, right? We have to import those things. And people are like, what about Puerto Rico? They grow coffee. Oh, no. Puerto Rico does grow a beautiful coffee, but the demand is so high in Puerto Rico, they import 2/3 of their coffee. So they're not helping the mainland out with their coffee supply. Hawaii, pretty much the same thing. They do give us some coffee, lovely coffee from Hawaii, but we've got to import it. And coffee's a whole other podcast, by the way.
Regenerative gardener and adjunct professor at UPenn, Toni Farmer, hints at a misconception that a lot of people carry. Why don't we just grow more coffee in the US? Well, because the US is the world's largest coffee consumer and produces less than 0.1% of what it drinks. Hawaii makes gorgeous coffee, but on a global scale, it's a drop in the bucket, less than 1% of US consumption. And climate change is squeezing Hawaiian yields too, due to heat waves scorching cherries, invasive pests thriving, and drought limits expanding. California can grow coffee, but the cost of land and labor makes your latte suddenly feel like a major financial decision. Like, do I pay rent this month or buy a cappuccino? And here's something wild. As the tropics get hotter, coffee zones are moving 500 meters uphill each decade, but mountains are finite. At some point, there is no up. Imagine waking up one day and realizing the entire world has run out of up. That's the supply-demand collision brewing beneath your morning brew. I will connect you to the full episode featuring Toni Farmer in the show notes. She is banging the drum that a food crisis is coming, and it's not just coffee.
The list is coffee, wine, chocolate. And these are things, I think the right way to think about these ingredients is that they'll be in precipitous decline over time and become increasingly more expensive. It's not that I'm saying that literally there'll be no chocolate on the face of the planet, but it's really only going to be a very luxurious good over time. Think caviar. I think that's where chocolate is going. And so the economic and cultural disruption that's going to come from this is quite profound. When you're feeding, the lower income populations of the world that have no extra disposable income, like that kind of even small increases in price lead to massive amounts of food insecurity. And that leads to, forced migrations and political instability and conflict.
Sam Kass is a former senior policy advisor to the Obamas, a chef and the author of The Last Supper, How to Overcome the Coming Food Crisis. I will link his full episode in the show notes, complete with suggestions for what we can do. That includes our coffee. Sam brings the existential dread with Harvard-level calm. He's warning us that coffee and chocolate and wine are on track to become luxury items, and not in the treat-yourself kind of way, in the reserved for very special occasions like winning the lottery kind of way. A climate study found that rising temperatures could trigger a 200% price increase in coffee by mid-century. Not because farmers are greedy, but because the land that can grow it is shrinking. Diseases are spreading and production costs are skyrocketing. But the part people don't talk about enough is the social fallout. When coffee fails, rural incomes collapse. Food insecurity spikes, migration surges, and conflict increases. In Ethiopia, Guatemala, and Honduras, coffee isn't just a lifestyle crop. It's the backbone of those rural economies. When the beans stop coming, people don't just lose their caffeine fix, they lose everything. This is a stark reminder that coffee isn't the problem. Coffee is the warning.
I spoke to women who were head of agricultural co-ops in Guatemala, for example. This is a woman-led short supply chain, which on the retail end is headed by a Guatemalan woman based in Florida who started a small coffee roaster and is sourcing directly from her home country of Guatemala, but also throughout Central America and Latin America. And she went back to the small village, women-led co-op of coffee farmers. And they had traditionally had male leaders head of the cooperative, but it was mostly women. And she really encouraged a woman who she felt was very capable, sort of a natural leader, and pushed her and said, I think you can do this. And again, kind of promoting women to step up, to really develop these leadership skills that maybe they didn't have because of the patriarchal nature of the society. So to see women helping other women develop these leadership capabilities was, I felt, kind of like the way this alternative food system that I advocate for needs to develop.
Author and longtime journalist Nancy Matsumoto's newly released Reaping What She Sows, How Women Are Rebuilding Our Broken Food System, is also featured on the podcast. I will include links in the show notes. What Nancy is describing here isn't just heartwarming, it's strategic, because globally, when women step into leadership and agriculture, 3 things consistently happen. Crop yields increase by 20 to 30%. More money is reinvested into community health, education, and adaptation. Sustainable practices also rise dramatically. In coffee specifically, women-led cooperatives are more likely to adopt shade-grown systems, diversified crops, regenerative soil practices, direct trade relationships, and transparent supply chains. And those practices actually make farms more climate resilient. Here's the kicker. Despite doing 70% of the manual labor on coffee farms, Women own less than 15% of the land. And yet, most climate adaptive solutions, short supply chains, cooperative governance, regenerative systems, are almost always pioneered by women. The future of coffee resilience may literally depend on shifting who holds the power to grow it. So, climate change is putting your morning coffee at risk. But this isn't a story of doom. It's a story of recognition. Coffee is simply the messenger, revealing how fragile and interconnected our systems really are and how urgently they need to evolve. And the good news is that evolution is already happening. Women-led cooperatives are transforming entire regions by adopting smarter, more resilient farming practices. Shade-grown and regenerative coffee systems are restoring biodiversity, cooling the land, protecting pollinators, and giving farms a fighting chance against rising temperatures. Certifications, when chosen carefully, aren't just labels. Bird-friendly, fair trade, Rainforest Alliance, and carbon-neutral standards are helping rebuild the ecological and economic foundation that coffee farmers rely on. Direct trade is putting real power and income back into farmers' hands, and scientists are expanding the genetic diversity of coffee by reviving wild species that can withstand heat, drought, and disease better. So no, it's not hopeless, not even close. But coffee is telling us something important. It's showing us, in the most relatable and intimate way, how climate change touches even the simplest parts of our lives. And maybe that's exactly the wake-up call we all need. Because once you understand that the comfort of your morning cup depends on the health of entire ecosystems, you start to see that climate action isn't abstract at all. It's personal. It's right here, swirling in the mug in front of you, reminding us that there is a way forward and that we still have time to choose it. Thank you for listening to One Bite is Everything, the podcast that connects every bite you take to the bigger world. If today's episode made you look at your morning coffee with new eyes, remember that climate stories are farm stories, and farm stories are people stories. The work we do at the For Farmers movement turns these conversations into real-world support for the farmers who grow our food and steward our landscapes. If you enjoy this podcast and believe in the work we do, I have a small ask. Give up the price of your cup of coffee today and contribute it to the For Farmers movement. Your support directly strengthens the farmers who keep our food system alive. You can find the link in the show notes or go to forfarmersmovement.com. If you love this episode, please rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. It helps more people find these conversations and helps us bring in the guests you want to hear from. This episode was co-produced by Sonia Dillon, with sound design and original music by Russell Chappa. Thank you to our guests, Etelle Higonnet from Coffee Watch, Toni Farmer, a professor at the University of Pennsylvania and a regenerative gardener, Sam Kass, policy advisor and author of The Last Supper, and Nancy Matsumoto, author of Reaping What She Sows. I'm your host, Dana DiPrima, and I'll see you again right here next week for another episode of One Bite is Everything. Until then, eat like it matters, because it does.